The conversation happens at the co-op in October, the way a lot of conversations happen at the co-op in October, which is between two men who have just finished a harvest and who are waiting on something, a parts order, a fuel delivery, a scale ticket, and who fill the waiting time with the kind of talk that farmers in the same community have always filled waiting time with, which is talk about the season just finished and the equipment that ran it, and what the numbers look like and what the plan is for next year. Warren Holt and Dale Pfizer have been farming adjacent ground for going on 18 years. They know each other the way people know each other when their fields share a fence line, and their operations share the same weather and the same market and the same county roads, which is well enough to speak plainly and plainly enough that what gets said between them at the co-op in October is generally closer to the truth than what either man might say in a different context to a different audience. Warren has just taken delivery on a new tractor. This is not news to Dale, because new equipment deliveries in a rural county are not private events. The truck comes down the road, the neighbors see it, and by evening the approximate make and model and the general financial implications of the transaction have made their way through whatever informal channel carries that kind of information in a community where everyone's operation is adjacent to everyone else's in more than just the geographic sense. Dale asks Warren about the new machine. Warren talks about it the way a man talks about a significant new purchase in the first week of ownership, which is with enthusiasm that is partly genuine appreciation for the machine's capabilities, and partly the natural momentum of a decision that has already been made and that is easier to be confident about when you are talking about its merits than when you are sitting alone with the financing documents. Dale listens and asks a reasonable question, which is what Warren did with the machine he traded in. Warren says he got a fair number on it. Dale nods. He does not say what he is thinking, which is a calculation he has been running in the background of his own equipment decisions for the better part of a decade and a half, that Warren's trading habit is the primary data source for. Dale drives home in a truck that is 12 years old, to a farm shed that contains a Massey Ferguson tractor he bought used 15 years ago, and he does not think about any of it further, because the calculation he has been running is not something that requires active thought at this point. It is simply a position he holds, the way you hold a position that has been confirmed enough times by enough evidence that it no longer needs defending, even to yourself. Dale Pfizer bought his Massey Ferguson 6180 in the spring of the year he and Warren became neighbors, which makes the machine and the neighboring relationship approximately the same age in Dale's experience of his farm. He bought it used from a farm estate sale 3 counties away at a price that reflected its age and hours accurately, and that left him without any financing arrangement attached to it, which was the primary criterion Dale applied to the purchase decision, because Dale's farm financial philosophy, formed early and held consistently, is that equipment debt is the category of farm debt most likely to outlast the productive capacity of the asset it was used to purchase, and most likely to create the kind of structural inflexibility that turns a manageable bad year into an unmanageable one. He paid cash for the 6180. Not comfortable cash, not cash that left his operating account in a position he was entirely happy with, but cash. And the machine was his from the day it arrived on his farm, without any monthly obligation attached to it that would persist regardless of what the commodity market or the weather or the input cost environment did in the years following the purchase. Warren Holt's relationship with equipment is organized around a different philosophy, one that has its own internal logic, and that is not without merit in the way that most equipment strategies have merit when evaluated on their own terms. Warren trades every 3 years. He has done this since he started farming seriously in his late 20s, thus inheriting a parcel of his family's ground and adding rented acres over time until his operation reached a scale that his lender and his accountant both considered viable as a primary enterprise. The 3-year cycle is based on a set of interlocking rationales that Warren has articulated to Dale on more than one occasion, not defensively but in the matter-of-fact way of a man explaining a system he believes in. Warranty coverage for the first years of ownership eliminates major repair risk during the period when the machine is working its hardest. Residual value is strongest in the first 3 years, making the trade-in number as favorable as it is going to get relative to the original purchase price. New technology in each generation of equipment delivers efficiency gains that compound across a trading operation in a way they do not compound for an operator running the same machine for 15 years. The logic is coherent. Warren has presented it to Dale, and Dale has listened to it and nodded and gone home to his paid-off Massey Ferguson without changing his position. Not because he cannot follow Warren's argument, but because he has a different argument and a different set of numbers. And he has never felt the need to win the debate out loud when the financial records of both operations are going to resolve it eventually without any help from either man. The first trade happens in the 3rd year of their neighboring relationship. Warren moves from his initial machine into a newer model, same brand, step up in horsepower, the transaction structured as a trade-in plus financing on the difference, which is the standard transaction structure for equipment of this price level, and which produces a monthly payment that fits within Warren's operating budget under the commodity price assumptions that his budget is built around at the time of the transaction. Dale watches the new machine arrive on Warren's farm and makes a note in the farm financial journal he keeps, not about Warren specifically, but about his own operation, recording the current status of the 6180, the hours on the machine, the maintenance performed that season, and the running total of what he has spent on the machine since the original purchase. He does this every year at the end of the season. It is not a complicated record. It is a simple running account of what the machine costs him in maintenance and repairs set against the original purchase price, producing a cumulative cost figure that he can compare against what a trading strategy would have cost him across the same period. He does not show this record to anyone. He keeps it because he wants to know the answer to a question that a lot of farmers argue about without ever actually calculating, which is what it really costs over a long period to run one machine well versus to trade regularly into newer iron. The second trade happens 3 years after the first. Warren's second machine, which Dale has watched work the adjacent fields for 3 seasons, leaves on a truck, and a newer one arrives. The financing on the new machine overlaps briefly with the tail end of the previous financing arrangement, which is the structural consequence of trading into financed equipment before the previous financing is fully retired, a consequence that Warren's accountant manages through the trade-in structure, but that creates a slightly higher ongoing payment obligation on each successive trade than the previous one carried. Dale makes his annual note in the farm journal. The 6180 is now 6 years old under his ownership, carries hours that reflect 6 seasons of primary farm use, and has required, in that 6-year period, a set of maintenance and repair expenditures that Dale records accurately. The cumulative cost, including the original purchase price, is a number that Dale looks at and compares against his estimate of what 6 years of Warren's trading strategy would have cost across the same period. The comparison is not close. Dale is ahead by a margin that is large enough to be meaningful to a mid-sized farming operation, and that does not require any favorable assumptions about commodity prices or input costs to remain meaningful across the range of scenarios Dale has thought through. The 6180 requires its first significant repair in its 8th year under Dale's ownership, which is the year after Warren's 3rd trade brings a newer machine to the adjacent farm. The repair is a hydraulic pump rebuild, a known wear item on this engine and transmission combination at high hours, and Dale handles it the way he handles every significant run on the machine, which is by sourcing the correct components, consulting the workshop manual, and doing the work himself over a weekend in November when the season's field work is finished and the machine is not needed for anything that cannot wait. The total cost of the hydraulic pump rebuild, including components and the incidental supplies the job requires, is a number that Dale records in the farm journal alongside the note that the machine is now operating correctly and that the repair has extended its useful service life by an interval that Dale estimates conservatively based on what he knows about how this machine wears and what the rebuilt pump's expected service interval is under his operating conditions. He does the rebuild on a Saturday and a Sunday. He does not consider this a hardship. He considers it a skill application that the machine rewards by continuing to work. Warren's fourth trade comes in the 12th year of their neighboring relationship. This one is different from the previous three in a way that Dale notices and that Warren, to his credit, does not obscure when they talk about it at the co-op the following spring. The trade-in value on the third machine, which is now 3 years old and has been worked hard across 3 seasons of Warren's full acreage operation, comes in below Warren's expectation based on the residual value projections his accountant used when the purchase was structured. The specific reason is a combination of higher than expected hours on the machine relative to the projected trade-in hour threshold, a softening in the regional used equipment market for that model year, driven by an oversupply of trade-ins from other operators running similar trading cycles, and a cosmetic condition issue on the cab interior that the dealer's appraiser deducted against in a way that Warren considers excessive and that the dealer's position on is not negotiable. The net result is a trade-in number that is low enough to require Warren to bring additional cash to the transaction to maintain the financing structure at a payment level his operating budget can accommodate, which means that the fourth financing arrangement is larger relative to the underlying asset value than the previous 3 were, which means that the monthly obligation on the fourth machine is higher than the monthly obligation on any of the previous machines, despite Warren's stated intention, expressed to Dale at the co-op that spring, to manage his equipment cost profile downward over time through the efficiency gains that newer iron delivers. Dale listens to this account and nods and says that sounds frustrating, which it does, and drives home to a machine shed where the 6180 is sitting at the end of its 12th season under his ownership, carrying hours that reflect 12 seasons of primary farm work, and that remains, as Dale's Farm Journal records show, the most cost-effective piece of equipment his operation has ever owned on a cumulative cost-per-hour basis. The machine is not without its history of attention. It has required the hydraulic pump rebuild in year 8. It has required a cab mount replacement in year 10, a job that Dale did himself with help from a neighbor over 2 days, and that cost him the components and the neighbor's reciprocal labor rather than a shop labor rate. It has required the standard progression of wear items that any machine accumulates across 12 seasons of primary use, addressed as they arose, correctly and completely, using correct replacement components sourced from the same regional supplier network that Dale has built relationships with over 12 years of being a consistent, reliable customer who pays his parts account on the first of the month without fail. The machine runs. It runs the way a machine runs when it has been given everything it needs every time it needed it, which is correctly and reliably, and without the particular drama of a machine that has been managed to a budget rather than managed to a standard. In the 13th year of Dale's ownership of the 6180 and the first year of Warren's fourth finance tractor, something happens that neither man planned for, and that the financial structures of their respective equipment strategies respond to in ways that reveal the structural difference between those strategies more clearly than any conversation at the co-op could have done. The commodity market turns against corn and soybean producers in the region, with the particular severity of a market correction driven by a combination of factors that no individual operator could have predicted or protected against through any operational decision available to them. Prices dropped to levels that compress margins across the region, turning what had been projected as adequate to good farm income years into marginal to loss years for operators whose cost structures were built around the price levels that prevailed before the correction. Both Dale and Warren are exposed to this market move in the same way in their grain marketing. They farm comparable ground with comparable yields, and they sell into the same market at the same prices. Where their exposure differs is in their cost structures, and the cost structure difference is most visible in the fixed obligation category, which is the category that contains equipment financing payments. Dale has no equipment financing payments. He has not had equipment financing payments since the spring he bought the 6180 15 years earlier and paid cash for it. His equipment cost structure in a difficult commodity year is the maintenance and repair costs that arise from operating the machines he owns, which are variable and manageable, and which in a difficult year can be deferred on non-critical items to preserve operating cash in a way that a fixed monthly financing obligation cannot be deferred, regardless of what the commodity market is doing. Warren has a financing payment on his fourth tractor that is higher than any of his previous financing obligations, and that exists regardless of what corn and soybeans sell for in the year it is due. The payment is not enormous in absolute terms, but in a year when margins have compressed to the point where every fixed cost line in an operating budget is a line that needs to be examined for reduction opportunity, a fixed equipment obligation that cannot be reduced and cannot be deferred is a structural problem that expresses itself in the operating account in ways that accumulate across the months of a difficult year into a position that Warren's lender notices and that Warren and his lender have a conversation about in the winter following the difficult year. A conversation that results in a restructuring of the operating account that Warren describes to Dale the following spring in the matter-of-fact way of a man reporting a fact that he is not pleased about, but that he is not going to pretend did not happen. Dale does not say anything to Warren about the farm journal and the 15 years of running cost comparisons he has been maintaining. He does not say anything about the calculation he ran in the third year of their neighboring relationship when Warren made his first trade and Dale made his first note in the journal. He says that the commodity market was hard on everyone that year, which is true, and that he hopes Warren's restructuring gives him the operating flexibility he needs going forward, which is also true. He says these things because they are true, and because the point of the financial comparison he has been maintaining for 15 years was never to win an argument with Warren Holt. The point was to know the answer to the question he asked himself when he bought a used Massey Ferguson for cash in the spring of the year he and Warren became neighbors, which is whether the strategy he had chosen was the correct one for the kind of farming operation he was building and the kind of financial resilience he wanted that operation to have when the things that cannot be controlled moved against it. The 15 years of records in his farm journal answer that question without requiring any interpretation or any favorable assumptions or any comparison to anyone else's situation. The answer is in the numbers, and the numbers are clear, and Dale knows what they say. The 6180 goes into its 16th season under Dale's ownership in the spring following the difficult commodity year. It has been serviced for the season in the way Dale services it every winter, completely and correctly, and with attention to every system that the previous season's work has subjected to wear or stress. The machine's hours reflect 16 seasons of primary farm work, which is a lot of hours on any tractor, and which means that the machine is not in the first part of its service life or even the middle part of it. Dale knows this. He is not managing the machine as though it is going to run indefinitely without eventual major expenditure. He is managing it as though every additional season it runs correctly is a season whose cost he can predict and control, and that does not carry a fixed financing obligation that persists regardless of what the season produces. When the machine eventually requires an expenditure that is large enough to make replacement more economical than repair, Dale will make that assessment and that decision at that time on the basis of actual costs and actual operational condition, not on the basis of a trading calendar that moves equipment regardless of what the equipment is actually doing or what the financial environment looks like at the moment the calendar says it is time to trade. Warren's fifth trade happens in the year the 6180 enters its 16th season. The fourth machine goes back to the dealer on a trade-in that Warren describes as better than the previous one, which is a low bar given what the previous trade-in produced, and a fifth machine arrives on the farm with a new financing arrangement attached to it that Warren has structured this time with a slightly longer term than his previous arrangements, reducing the monthly obligation at the cost of a longer payoff period. Dale watches the new machine arrive from across the fence line, the way he has watched 4 previous machines arrive across the same fence line over 16 years. And he makes his annual note in the farm journal and goes back to whatever he was working on when the truck came down the road. He does not feel superior about the comparison. He does not feel vindicated in any dramatic sense. He feels what a man feels when a decision he made a long time ago, for reasons he understood, then has been confirmed over a long period by evidence he has tracked carefully, and that continues to point in the same direction it has always pointed. He feels, in the specific and undramatic way of a farmer who has been right about something for 16 years, simply correct. The machine is in the shed. The operating account is in a position that the difficult commodity year compressed but did not break. The farm journal has 16 years of entries that tell a story nobody asked to hear and that Dale has never told to anyone, not because the story is a secret, but because the story is his, and the farm is his, and the machine is his, and what it has cost him across 16 years to run it, well, is a number that belongs in the farm journal and not in any conversation at the co-op, where the waiting time gets filled with talk about new machines and trade-in numbers and warranty coverage and efficiency gains, and where Dale Pfizer nods at the right moments and drives home to a machine that is older than anyone at the co-op would think is worth keeping, and that has cost him less across its 16 seasons than Warren Holt has spent on trade-in losses alone.